I know it's all ages Sunday. Today I'm starting up here and we'll end with an activity. So we'll kind of combine things today. So in today's gospel text, the disciples had been busy. Shortly before the story that we heard today, Jesus called the 12 and sent them out 2 by 2, healing, preaching, and casting out unclean spirits. At this point, they have returned to Jesus, excited about all that they've been able to accomplish. I can just imagine them interrupting each other to tell the story. John, tell about the time that guy had that unclean spirit and you were able to do something that no one else had been able to do. No, but wait, you're jumping ahead. Let me tell it from the beginning. Well, Jesus has an interesting response. He says, come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. And we read, for many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. They are excited, they are hyper, and Jesus attempts to remove them from the situation all around them. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place all by themselves. And at least while they're in the boat, they get a little time alone. Now we might wonder why, with so many people needing so much, Jesus thinks that resting time is so very important. Anybody have any ideas?
Can't help anybody else.
Can't help anybody else. Okay. Well, Sabbath rest. Right? Okay. Smith and Pattison, in their book Slow Church, quotes Rabbi Abraham Heschel as they say, we often assume that humans are the apex of the first week. So for children, the apex is the top of creation. Okay? But this isn't so. Though humans are given dominion over the earth to protect it and nurture it for its flourishing and for our own, the pinnacle of creation was not humanity, but Sabbath rest, menuha. After the 6 days of creation, what did the universe still lack? Menuha. Came the Sabbath, came menuha, and the universe was complete. Smith and Pattison then quote Dan Allender, a Christian therapist and writer, as he describes menuha, that Sabbath rest. Now you children can only imagine, and you adults can remember. In many ways, God's rest on the 7th day of creation is paralleled by the birthing process and the period after birth, when the labor is finished, yet the bonding begins. The mother and father gaze endlessly at their child who is distinct from the parents because she's no longer merely in the mind and the womb of the mother, but external and separate. She's no longer solely in the imagination or deep in the womb. She's finally released to be held in the arms of the parent. This attachment brings parent and child into a bond that is secure, will last through thick and thin, heartache and loss, and provide the child with an assurance that all will be well. Smith and Pattison conclude, Sabbath then becomes for us the day in which we pause our striving and start abiding. Far from a legalistic requirement, Sabbath is an exercise in radical grace. In the midst of our sin and brokenness, God loves us. Our Creator looks down at us with absolute love. We set aside the Sabbath to meet that gaze. Jesus may also be recalling his own early ministry. In the first chapter of the book of Mark, we are told that Jesus was baptized, was tempted in the wilderness, called his first disciples, healed a man with an unclean spirit, and many people at Simon Peter's house. Then in the early morning, we read, while it was still very dark, He got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And the disciples hunt for him, and when they find him, they say, "Everyone is searching for you." Soon after, Jesus is approached by a man with leprosy who kneels and begs him, "If you choose, you can make me clean." And we're told that Jesus is moved with compassion and says, "I do choose, be made clean." Well, there's a definite similarity between that story of Jesus' early ministry and what he tries to do with the disciples in today's text. They have a little time alone with him in the boat before they arrive back on shore and are immediately swamped, not by water, but with people. And Jesus has compassion on them. He teaches and heals them. Barbara Brown Taylor cites a prayer called Welcoming Sabbath in a prayer book called Gates of Prayer. It goes like this: "Our noisy day has now descended with the sun beyond our sight. In the silence of our praying place, we close the door upon our hectic joys and fears, the accomplishments and anguish of the week we have left behind. What was but moments ago the substance of our life has become memory. What we did must now be woven into what we are. On this day, we shall not do, but be. We are to walk the path of our humanity, no longer ride unseeing through a world we do not touch and only vaguely sense. No longer can we tear the world apart to make our fire. On this day, heat and warmth and light must come from deep within ourselves. They come from the warmth that is kindled by setting aside that time to meet God's gaze. It would appear that there's a strong connection between Sabbath time and compassion or empathy that's needed to make us truly attentive to the suffering of others. We are to walk the path of humanity, no longer ride unseeing through a world we do not touch and only vaguely sense. Dr. Brené Brown talks about the difference between empathy and sympathy. She says that empathy, which is literally feeling with, fuels connection, while sympathy drives disconnection. And if you haven't yet seen the new Disney Pixar movie Inside Out, which is for adults as much as children, I highly recommend it. It speaks of just this issue. Has anybody seen Inside Out yet? That's a great one, isn't it? Well, Dr. Brown says that it's like someone is in a deep, dark hole saying, "I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed." Now, a response from empathy or compassion would be to climb down into the hole beside that person and say, "Hey, I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone." Empathy is a choice, a vulnerable choice. In order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. And then Dr. Brown distinguishes that type of response from a sympathetic response, which would be like this. Just imagine a person peering down into the hole from outside, saying something like, "Ooh, it's bad, You want a sandwich?" And then the response that is much more likely to be from sympathy than from empathy, which is any sentence that starts with the words "at least," which avoids trying to feel a person's pain by attempting to convert that pain into a silver lining. Now listen. As in, someone says, "I think my marriage is falling apart." And the person responding from sympathy rather than from empathy says, "Hey, at least you have a marriage." Or someone says, "I'm flunking my math class." And the person responding from sympathy rather than empathy says, "But at least you have A's in all all your other classes. Not helpful. But it's also very human to respond in that way, especially when we forget to set aside the Sabbath to meet the love of God in God's gaze. Dorothy Bass, in her chapter, Keeping Sabbath, from the book Practicing Our Faith, suggests that 3 things to avoid when trying to keep the Sabbath are work, commerce, and worry. Refraining from work, she says, not every day, but 1 in 7, opens the temporal space within which a glad and grateful relationship with God and a peaceful and appreciative relationship with nature and other people can grow. And commerce, buying and spending are closely related to working too much. They depend on work. They create the conditions for more work, and often our work. And worry. It may be difficult to banish cares from our minds altogether, but we can refrain from activities that we know will summon worry. Activities like paying bills and making lists of things to do in the coming week. Maybe we might say homework, unless you haven't done it before. She adds, and what is good on a Christian Sabbath? Most important is joyful worship that restores us to communion with the risen Christ and our fellow members of Christ's body, the church. For Christians, every day is Easter Sunday, a time to gather together with song and prayer, to hear the word proclaimed and to recognize Christ in the breaking of the bread. It's a festival, a spring of souls, a day of freedom not only from work, but from condemnation. It's about taking part in the activity by which God is shaping a new creation. It's a foretaste of the feast to come. What are some other options for Sabbath that you might think of that would be simply celebrated? Anybody have any ideas? What'd you say?
Nature.
Nature. Yes, being out in nature. Anybody else have any ideas of good ways to celebrate the Sabbath?
Family time.
Family time. Okay. Anybody else?
Listening to music.
Listening to music. Okay. All right.
Doing something for others.
Doing something for others. Okay.
My favorite, nap time.
Now, okay. All right. Yeah, that's great. Let's see. I think you mentioned pretty much everything that I have on my list here. Enjoying art, enjoying music, all of those things, praying, playing, all the many ways that we play. Visiting someone who's alone. Okay, all right. Going to the beach. Okay. Yeah. Any ways in which we celebrate, especially as we leave this assembly. Pastor John Stevens writes wonderful haiku poetry. You know haiku? It's the kind of poetry that's 5 syllables, then 7 syllables, then 5. Okay. And one that I thought that was particularly appropriate for today seems to link letting go of worry with Sabbath peace. It's very simple. Here it is. God, is it too late? God laughs and smiles wide at me. Silly, God hugs me. So, in meeting God's gaze, I know God smiles and hugs, that I might truly hug others. Now, as I close, I'm going to pass out some note cards. I'm going to give you a little homework on this All Ages Sunday. Let's try not to think about it as work. But I will invite you to think for a few minutes, then write on one side of the card one way in which God blesses you through Sabbath rest. And on the other side, I invite you to think about those people who need you. And to start out that sentence writing, so that. Okay? So on the one side, one way in which God blesses you through Sabbath rest, and as you turn it over so that you might be able to do what it is that you do, visiting people or whatever. So, do I have volunteers to pass out the cards? Stephen and Mackenzie, would you like to pass out the cards? Okay. Amen.